Hey everybody, this is Brian, your friendly neighborhood dungeon master and the host of Cannon Fodder. Are you interested in brand new playable content, DM tips and tricks, and expanded lore for the Fractured Realms? Then consider checking out the 20-Sided Newsletter, a free bi-monthly email newsletter that delivers tons of cool content and keeps you up to date on all the latest projects within the 20-Sided podcast universe. To subscribe, you can click on the link in the show notes below or go to 20sidedpodcasts.substack.com. Enjoy. Hello and welcome back to My First Dungeon, the tabletop role-playing podcast where we put first-time DMs through their paces as we build and run their very first one-shot and then circle back around to discuss what went right, what went wrong, and how they can make their game even better. This right here is the fifth and final episode of the increasingly inaccurately named three-part series following our first-time DM, Abby Hepworth. Back in episode 2, we ran her Western one-shot, but were unable to finish it, one of the ever-present perils of a one-shot, so we decided to get the gang back together and finish the adventure. So today, we're going to be talking about the second half of that one-shot, and also discuss what adjustments Abby made between sessions, where she thought she improved, and also where she hopes to still get better. So Abby, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, babe.
Of course. Great to have you back. Let's start off with a bit of a recap of last session. You think you can walk us through what happened on part 2 of the Deplorable Four's adventure?
Yes, I can. So we met up with the Deplorable Four as they had just discovered Marsden Greed's treasure chest in the back of the prison in a cell, with Jolene in hot pursuit digging underground, and discovered that it was sort of a two-part puzzle to get into the chest. The first part being that it was very tightly tied with a rope, which upon a ridiculously easy DC investigation, you guys realized was a knot that was identical to the one holding Gord's belt in place, which was Kevin's special request for his character. So that was a very fun thing to do. And then there was a second piece of the puzzle of getting into the chest. Everybody figured it out and got into the treasure chest, discovering a special sword in the process. And then as you guys were trying to make a way out the back door with your phenomenal loot, you found yourselves face to face with Jolene and her crew and battled. Jolene revealed herself to be a harpy matriarch and sang to you all. Saris used her fancy, exciting new sword to help defeat Jolene and her gang. And the Deplorable Four did, I'd say, 2 out of the 3 things they were hoping to do. They defeated Jolene and they got away with the treasure. However, in a last second effort to kind of save their own skins from going to prison, they had to give credit basically to Jolene's cronies, saying they stole the treasure so that people would go on a wild goose hunt trying to find them to make away with it. So, well, that's one way you can look at it. But the way I look at it is that, well, we defeated the mighty Jolene. Her little crony is just off there, doing his own thing. But when word gets around that we actually duped these people, well, let me tell you, that's when the Deplorable Four is going to be having their name in lights, as it were. So yeah, so reputation-wise, Deplorable Four, it was we did a cool thing. No one can know right now, but hopefully we'll work around that eventually.
One day.
That was successful. I didn't kill anybody. We made our way, and yeah, it ended on a high note.
It did. It was a very fun second session. Mostly, it was basically just 2 scenes. It was essentially the...
Yeah, it was short. We didn't have that much left in my prepared one shot to actually get through.
Yeah. And we had the puzzle in the room, which I think we figured out very quickly, and then...
You just figured it out immediately.
And then, this is another reason why I think it is better to have puzzles that are too easy than too hard, because yes, we figured it out immediately, and then we got to play with the fact that we figured it out immediately. So there was half an hour of us just fucking around with Gord and trying to lead him to the answer, which was extremely
not
fun.
Even that part of the Gord whole rope knot situation. Yes, you guys knew kind of what it was and you had a ton of fun leading him, but then the actual puzzle part of unlocking the chest, I think at least 3 of the 4 of you, maybe all 4 of you, figured it out immediately. But then again, everyone took their time to like find a way to make it fun, even though it was like, oh, we know the answer. And so people like took their time to be like, but how do we deliver the information to the puzzle in like a funny way? And I appreciated that as a DM because it made me feel a little bit better about the fact that you guys, I didn't prep something that was challenging enough, but you guys had fun with it.
I did like Naka's whole like in character explanation of, well, there's five. I've met what his thing was like.
The bats have two wings and a mouth, so they have 3 points to them, and then a spider has 6 legs.
Yeah, and
Ceres was like that animal that famously has 8 legs.
yeah. Don't worry about that.
It was fine.
Very fun bit, and then we got to play because you had this kind of like second in to Gord's character backstory, this like Gordian knot belt thing. If it hadn't come up before, it would definitely come up now because he would recognize this identical knot.
It was a thing where, yeah, I had hoped to be able to touch on it earlier, but I pretty immediately was like, oh, we'll, at the very least, when you guys get to the treasure, it will be tied up with a knot. Even so, if you hadn't touched on it before then, you would have had that fun reveal at that point.
Right. And then we got to kind of do the full, like, we kind of completed the joke, as it were, of like, hey, Gord, we figured out how to undo this knot. What do you think? You want to try it on yourself? And then Kevin's line of, well, I can't cut it. This is my best belt. Was
my favorite part about it is that it insinuates that Gord owns other belts. Why does he has no need for them?
Yeah, just likes having them.
But yeah, no, you were saying it's like we really only had 2 scenes left. Was the puzzle and then the final battle with Jolene.
So before we get into the final battle, let's talk about just kind of broadly over the game. How did you feel this game versus the first game? Because I know at the end of the first game, we talked and you said you felt a bit disappointed. You felt underprepared. Mm-hmm. You felt at times kind of lost in what you were doing. How did this second session compare to the first one?
I think because I knew we had 2 sort of points to hit, that we had a puzzle for you guys to solve, and then we had a battle. And that was effectively it. And then I would be like wrapping up the end, depending on what happened. Somehow, I think I spent a little more time prepping and preparing because I had learned my lesson. And so I felt better about that. And then something about knowing that there were only kind of 2 things that I had planned. And both of them were a little bit more of like a mechanical.
Right.
Had mechanical aspects to them outside. It wasn't just like you guys show up at a bar and now who do you want to talk to? And there's like endless possibility of where you can go and what you could do and who you could see. Yeah,
the lines were a little more clear in these areas because like the puzzle has a solution and the fight is also in a sense like has a solution.
Right. It was like once we rolled initiative and you guys were in it, like, yeah, you can do whatever you want. But also it was like there's a little bit more construct. It was the walls of the sandbox were a little smaller.
Yeah.
So I felt a little more sure of myself there. But then it was funny to me because I feel like even by the end of this session, again, it was a thing where I was like, I feel like I'm only a couple steps ahead of you guys, and was starting to feel that kind of nervousness of like, oh my God, I don't know what I don't know what words are coming out of my mouth. Mm. However, having done it once before and having talked about it a lot with you, both like on the podcast and also just in person in between the games, I felt a little more okay about it, where I was like, crap, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what words are going to come out of my mouth. And I feel like there are a couple times where I stumbled over myself, but I was like, but this is what it is. Right. So I do think there were some improvements from the last session. I also think that obviously I've only done this twice. I'm very green. Mm. But I had a lot of fun doing it. And so feel like it was like, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff I screwed up, but
if you had fun, you did it right.
You did it right. So yeah.
One of the key tenets of this show. If you're having fun, you're doing it right. Because I mean, ultimately, and I think to your point of you never felt more than a few steps ahead, I would maybe challenge you to think of it in a slightly different way, in that if you are a player, like, if you are a PC, you're playing the same game as the DM, but you come into it completely unprepared. Like you have your character sheet and you know what that character sheet does, but you're not planning out your steps ahead. You're reacting to what the DM does. If you think of being a DM a little more as just being another player at the table, just with different responsibilities, I sometimes kind of find that that's easier. It's a less pressure filled way to think of it. Because like, yes, you do need to prepare. You do need to have a world built, but in the moment to moment actions, you just have to kind of react to what the other people are doing rather than focus on planning or being prepared. Because you're only ever going to have as much track as you're able to like toss out in front of you.
Right. It is a thing where I feel like, especially it was the very end of the second session, and I realized that we finished the battle, but that there needed to be some tidying up afterwards. Mm-hmm. And it happened that you guys had one of Jolene's followers with you. And it was like, what are you going to do with him? And then Marsden shows up and is like, where the fuck is my treasure? Who are you guys? What happened to Jolene, basically? And I felt like I was attempting to be a sort of like math genius, where it was like I was simultaneously attempting to calculate and figure out every possible route that you guys could take and what I would do to react to any of them. Mm-hmm. And then what would the next step be in the next. And it's just like this branching of 1 million, like the possibilities just becomes exponential. And my brain was like, and if they do this, then you could do this. And then you do blah, 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 blah. It like was fine because I could listen to you guys and react to what you were planning to do or whatever. And it was such a brief moment, but I feel like it was the kind of thing where in this game that happened maybe once or twice. In the previous game, I feel like I was doing that a lot. And I think that if I approach it more of a like, let me see what you guys do, and then I will figure out what I do afterwards, rather than trying to preemptively assume what you guys will do or prep for all the possibilities or whatever, right, that it might be less overwhelming. That was a thing as well this time around, that I feel like I tried very actively to allow myself a little more space and literal time when it was like my turn, being like, what would the right move be? Or like in the battle being like, so I'm now this guy, what would he do? And like actually letting myself kind of sit and think for a second, rather than feeling like I needed to have something prepared at all times.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about a highlight of the session for you. I want to get a couple of like broad areas, then we'll kind of move into specifics of kind of the battle and the puzzle. What was a highlight of this session for you? Something that either you just enjoyed playing, like a fun moment, or something that you felt you did particularly well this session as compared to last session?
I was definitely more prepared for the battle and felt it went better. It was a lot more, it was much closer to an even match. I will say that even still, I wanted to, because like there were just a couple of like fucking phenomenal rolls and swings from people where they just demolished like Kevin with the snakes, where even I got ahead of myself and I was like, he didn't even roll damage. And I was like, you send that thing to the fucking moon. Or Sarah's Lauren rolling, and just like the amount of damage she was doing could have killed literally everyone present. And I was like, I feel like I need to honor that, because also she's the first time she's using this cool new weapon. And I wanted to keep having, my plan had been to like have more snakes pop kind of out of behind things, and maybe have another crony pop up somewhere, but probably like more snakes and things. And the reason I didn't was because we were playing a little bit later in the day after it had been a work day. And some people had been like, it's been a long day, and it was getting later, and we've been playing a little longer than I think even we necessarily planned to or something. And I didn't want to reach a point where everyone felt tired.
Sure.
And was just kind of waiting for the end of the battle. And so I feel like the battle, I felt a lot more confident. I feel like it went a lot better. It was more of it was closer to an even match. And I actively made a decision to be like, don't add more guys, let them finish this up, because I think that's what my players want.
Yeah, I think there was a point in there where a thing that I always think about is once a battle kind of becomes inevitable. So usually once the big bad is defeated and there's only like henchmen left, you kind of want to wrap it up pretty quick from that, because, when we got to the end of that battle, we had defeated Jolene. We had like, a big badass moment where she fell out of the sky. And there's one crony left. Like, yes, we could go around in initiative and like finish them off.
Oh, I was never going to make you fight him. He wasn't going to attack you guys at that point, because he would have been like too traumatized by seeing Jolene die. But yeah, it was like, I felt very much like I was on a border where I was like, do I make this keep going, injure them more, make it feel more like we don't know which way this is going to swing, or let them kind of keep crushing it and we will wrap this up. And as I said, I felt like that was the way players were leaning towards. Like, we were having fun, and I'm sure people would have continued playing. And it's not like anybody actively was like, Abby, can we wrap this up or whatever?
Right.
But it was a thing where I was like, okay, we've been going for a little while. I don't want to make anyone like feel like this isn't fun anymore.
Right. On the subject of adding the snakes in, a thing to think about for future when you're doing this kind of game of balancing the battle on the fly, like adding in more people or taking away people, things like that. When you introduce the additional snake, there was just kind of like an additional snake that came in. I think it'd be fun to give a little more narrative reason for like why these bonus snakes are coming. So like Jolene yells out, "Hey, Ansel, grab Big Bertha," and he like reaches into his backpack and a giant snake comes out. Like,
yeah, I could have given more context for why the snake was popping out, or I could have had 2 pop out for every 1 you killed or something.
Because then it could also be a thing where if there is a place they're coming from or a person that is summoning them, then it gives us like a mini challenge where, oh, we got to fuck up that guy.
You got to plug that hole or this room is going to keep flooding. But we also have to kill Jolene because she's going to keep injuring us. By
adding in different elements of the battlefield that we can interact with, not just hit and kill, I think it creates a more dynamic battle.
Yeah. This was definitely a thing where I feel like it was the area where I feel like I improved the most, and is also still the area where I feel like I need the most improvement, like moving forward. It's still my weakest link, I think, but I definitely felt like I felt much better about this round. And so I'm like, all right, girl, next one will be even better. Like, whatever.
Right. No, I think between the first battle and this battle, I think it was kind of night and day, where this one felt like more things were happening.
The space was better.
Yeah. The variety of opponents was better. It wasn't just guys coming at you. There was like some different aspects to it.
I also feel like everyone got to do their cool thing.
Yes, everyone kind of got to do their thing. You know, we got sneak attack. Saris was able to like get the sword working. I was able to do just buttloads of damage with different spells and stuff.
And the guy's coming at you and no one hit you because you're fucking
Turtle. Yeah, no one hit me because my AC is naturally 17.
Naka got to use his gun that he throws, and then he also got you to use Eldritch Blast and his like charging thing. Gord got to rage and do a frenzied rage.
Right. So everyone's kind of doing their like class features, which is always a thing you want to see. Since we're on the battle, let's stay here for a minute. Let's talk about 2 areas. One was just a rules thing that we talked about afterwards that we had both forgotten. And that was the Harpy's song. It induces a charm effect. A charmed creature cannot willfully attack the charmer, which was a thing that came up when
Naka, as Chevelle.
When Chevelle, yes.
Attacked her on the rooftop and really helped bring her down and put her in a really good position for that killing blow.
Now that being said, that's just like a minor rules thing. It's like, oh, we forgot to do this. Oh, well.
It is also a thing where I need to go back and reread in the book the description of the harpy, but I don't remember in reading the description of what luring song is. I feel like it's the kind of thing where I'm like, that should be in the book. It should say she does luring song. You're charmed by the creature and you cannot attack her while you're charmed. And it may say that and I might be wrong, but it's a thing where I'm like, oh, of course I didn't know that or whatever. Yeah.
It doesn't, or at least I'm pretty sure it doesn't. It just says the creature is charmed.
Yeah.
Which is a condition that has that
like
is
you
kind of
should already know, or you would, yes, have knowledge of like what that thing is.
And really, maybe that is a good small section to study. And really for anyone out there who's a first time or a new DM is to look at the conditions table and look at condition, like look at the difference between being grappled and being restrained. Look at what charmed means. Look at what being poisoned means.
Well, that was the thing with the snake, because it was a giant poisonous snake. I, for some reason, did have the wherewithal beforehand in seeing there was a poisonous snake and that if it bit you, you had to make a constitution saving roll. And it would do additional poison damage, but you did not then have the poison condition.
Right, which are two totally separate things.
Which are separate things. And I remember, I think because I've had more experience as a player, dealing with like poison or poison condition or whatever that I recognized. And I was like, oh, which one is it? And are they different? And so for the snake, I did prep that. But for Jolene's song, I missed it and did not think ahead on that.
And there is a fun thing where playing with conditions and like learning those and really getting them involved into a combat can be very fun, because now we're grappling this person, like keeping them still. We're knocking this person prone. We're poisoning this person, giving them disadvantage. By taking advantage of these different conditions, either as a player and like inflicting conditions on your enemies, or as a DM and like limiting your players with these hampering conditions, you can really heighten the battle in different ways, because now your player who has a million options has fewer options. And that can be it can be frustrating in a way that is fun, because now you're trying to overcome these surmounting odds.
Do you know what's funny to me is even in the battle, I was thinking to myself when Chevelle got up there and went to attack her, I was like, but he shouldn't want to. And I had the actual thought where I was like, feels very weird to me that like he's charmed by her and yet is doing damage. And I added a like narration of him being like emotionally confused about the fact that he's in love with her, but wants to kill her and is like trying to be like, but why did my friends want me to hurt her again? And it makes me laugh now because it's like somewhere in my head, I was like, wait, this doesn't make sense. I should have stopped and like checked the rules a little bit.
Right.
So I do also think that there's a thing in playing when you find yourself in a situation where you're like, this doesn't make that much sense. It's like, maybe you are doing something wrong, and like stop and double check it, because I was, and I knew it somewhere in my head, even though I didn't actually, I knew it in my subconscious. Yeah.
Within the battle, there was a lot that went right. So the things that went right were we had a variety of opponents. We had a much more interesting battlefield. It was now 3-dimensional instead of just 1-dimensional, where in the train battle it was just kind of forward back. This was forward back, side side, up and down, and a variety of opponents and different things. The one area that I think you missed an opportunity with was with the Harpy matriarch, specifically with her ability to fly. Because I liked she started on the roof as like Jolene. We didn't know she was a Harpy yet, and was kind of like directing her troops from up there. And then once it was revealed she was a Harpy, she had wings, but then kind of just stayed on the roof.
So in my head, she was hovering above the roof. I did not narrate that to you. And then at some point in time was like, she should have flown out so she wasn't directly over the surface. Exactly. And I think by the time I sort of realized it, or was like, in my head, I was picturing certain things, but then I wasn't saying them out loud. And I was like, well, we're past the point of no return.
I do think
I didn't make the most of that monster.
Yes. I think especially with monsters that have things like flight, when your characters don't have that yet, that can be a particularly scary thing as a player. Cause like you can't, like, especially for martial classes, they're not able to like hit it as easily. They've got to use, thrown weapons, which they may not be as good with. And it's a fun challenge, because now it could be a thing where she was hovering over the street and Chevelle, rather than just kicking her right there, now has to consider jumping to hit her or something. So there are some fun things that could happen there. So that was kind of a minor...
Something I could improve on.
Yeah, there was an underutilization of a monster.
Yeah.
But not terrible. It was just a thing that could be improved on, like using this monster to their fullest ability. And to be fair, the DM always has a harder time because they're running 3 or 4 or 5 creature blocks, and they're trying to like optimize all of them. Something's always going to fall through the cracks, and like one monster's not going to be doing one of their things, and like that's fine. But the more you're aware and the more you try to heighten different aspects of different monsters, I think the more interesting the battle will end up being.
Definitely.
The other thing that, and this is the thing that I've been very actively trying to do in my own games, because I think it's a great way to heighten, especially battles, because battles can often get a little, even with great like flowery descriptions and things, and even with a very intense and complicated battle, it can get a little, I do this, I hit him, you miss, I attack, it hits, roll damage. I attack, it misses. Oh no, I attack, whatever. I think you did a very good job of adding in the like flowery descriptions of like how things are hitting and missing, and like letting people narrate how they're doing their killing blows or what their, spiritual weapon looks like type things. The thing that I've been trying to do, and I would recommend you do as well, and really any DM out there running a battle, is have your villains react to the player's turns.
Okay.
There is, I think, especially in a D&D game, we feel very free in non-combat scenarios to like riff and to talk over each other and to kind of like jump on each other. And once we get into a initiative order, once we find a more structured area, it kind of goes to, it's your turn, it's my turn. It's your turn, it's my turn. And that is good, because the last thing you want to do as a player or as a DM is step on another player's time in the spotlight. And when it's your turn, you want to do all the cool things. Like, that's your time to shine. You want to make sure you're heightening that. So other players during that time, so say I'm taking a turn, every other player at the table should be letting me shine as much as I can, as well as doing their best to try to heighten it. So throw in little like comments or things that serve to heighten or affirm the choices that whatever player is making. And in the same way, it's a good idea for a DM to look at any actions that a player is making and comment on it as the villain.
Yeah.
So anytime anyone's making a move as a player, have your villains like be communicating to each other or communicating to the players. So if Gord is taking out these snakes, have, Jolene be telling the guys to protect the snakes, or just by adding in that little bit of communication, it feels more like a fight scene in a movie where the two sides are like actively working and like communicating and collaborating within their own teams.
Totally. Yeah.
Rather than
everyone taking turns and you're basically just waiting for your turn.
Yeah. There's what ends up happening is there's kind of an implied communication between these people. Like, we know that everyone is optimized, but without the communication that is required for optimization. When you add in that communication, it can become very fun and interactive, because then also there's an additional thing for you to do on your turn. And even when it's not necessarily your turn, not only do you get to do your cool attack and your bonus action and your movement and kind of do your story beats, now the world is interacting back with you and your fellow players are interacting back with you. So now what could be a very by rote thing becomes more of that riff, becomes more of that talk over that is so much fun in non-combative and social encounters.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like it is a thing that does not come naturally to me, of like in games where I've been a player. In battle stuff, I feel like I go into pure game mode of, I'm like, how do I optimize my player to cause the most damage or to do this so that we can defeat the bad guy? I go fully into like, this is a thing that you either win or lose. How do I win? And so it's always funny to me. And I feel like I'm getting better at recognizing the benefit of players who, like, you as a DM or whoever the DM is, would be like, all right, so like, you used your action, your bonus action. Is there anything else you want to do on your turn? And the player will say like, yeah, I want to turn to the big baddie and be like, fuck you, miss, or whatever. And I'm like, why would you bother? But it's always funny and something that like I enjoy. And it's just a thing that doesn't occur to me to even do, because in my head, it's like, I use my action to do something important. I use my bonus action to do something important. If I cannot do anything else important, I'm done with my turn. And it's like, no, there's a benefit just in the way that like the social stuff is all so much fun and the exploration is so much fun. Is like, as I said, I love when Noah's good about doing this. And Chinook actually also is really good about doing this in season 2. It's just funny. And it's a thing that does not come naturally to me. So it is then a good thing when I'm the DM of like having even more people to keep track of. I feel like it's a thing to be conscious of, because I also think as a DM, it makes more of a difference.
I kind of disagree that it's not something that comes naturally to you. If I can comment on your aspect of yourself.
Yeah.
What I think it is, it doesn't come naturally to you once initiative is rolled. But I think anytime you're doing a social encounter or anything.
Oh, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Right. But I guess what I'm saying is, a lot of people have, they kind of view this game as almost two things. There is the goof around social aspect, do whatever you want, blue sky. And then initiative gets rolled and now it's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
And I think if you take down that wall, I mean, admittedly they are two separate things, but if that wall becomes a little bit more porous, you can still have the min-max optimizing your turn while also getting some of the kooky fun wackiness. Hey, let's do this crazy thing that we see in social encounters or in something that is non-initiative based.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And I think having a little bit of that fun in something that is more rigid really enhances the game and just gives you so much more to do, especially when you're a player who it's not your turn. Rather than just sitting there waiting for your turn, planning your turn, your buddy does something cool, have your player react to it. Or have your character react to it. I mean, gores someone with his horns and pins them in a building, throw off a joke, or like, hand them a thing. There are a lot of things you can do that are non-combat related, that are like free actions that are fun, and not only will enhance your experience of playing, will enhance that like active player's experience. Because not only are they doing the cool thing, their friends, both in game and IRL, are cheering them on and like having fun.
Right. Yeah.
So we were talking about highlights, and I actually want to touch on a highlight that I really liked in the moment. It was something very small. It's probably something you didn't even pay that much attention to. And I think this is in direct response to some of my comments from our first Talkback episode, in episode 3, was when Saris rolled a nat 20 to like open the back door and look outside, which was like such a bummer of a nat 20 to roll. Like, when you're rolling a nat 20,
check
you want
to see if
something.
the door's unlocked, and you roll a nat 20. It's like, yeah, the door is unlocked, but you also would have gotten that information with a 10 or higher.
Right. But what I liked so much was you describing the manner in which she opened the door, how she like, and because it affirmed her character, it was like, exactly what type of lock it is. You've seen this type of wood before. You know how this wood creaks when it opens.
Yeah.
And you like put your hand in a certain spot to prevent that resonance, and you open the door perfectly silently. I really liked that because I saw that nat 20 get rolled and I was like, oh yeah.
Like it feels like what a waste of a nat 20, right? Like I wish I'd rolled this in combat or something. Yeah.
It is a time when I, as a DM, I know would probably make a bit of a joke out where I'd be like, yeah, you open the door so perfectly, the door thanks you or something.
That also would have been fun. Yeah.
But
the door is briefly animated and is like, wow, girl, your hands on me.
Like, oh, haven't been touched like that since I was carved. You know what I mean? But I think that's a disservice to the players doing that kind of joke. I think that's fun every now and then. But I think giving that affirmation of character of this is a person who is so sneaky, they've studied the wood of the door, was very fun. And it was a small moment, but it was one that I very much smiled at, where I was like, that was a fucking ace move.
Oh, yay. Well, it was very much like Laura rolled that 20. And yeah, I was like, I mean, you could have rolled a 10 and I was going to tell you, yeah, the door's unlocked, and like you peek your head out and you're pretty sure no one's there, but like maybe someone, with a 10, you would have been like, you pretty sure, but not positive. And so with a 20, yeah, I was like, you're going to get all the information where it's like, it's out there. I told you guys after you got out there that there were like the covered wagons down the way to give you a place to run to and all this stuff. But yeah, I was like, she deserves this as a like really cool thing, and loved it. And then also, I'm pretty sure I said something like, for the rest of you, you guys didn't even realize she'd gone over and opened the door because she was so and then, sneaky and stealthy. And
then like reaffirmed that joke that we had from the first session of Saris would just sneak off and then come back with the information. We wouldn't have even realized she was gone.
Well, it's funny because with the creaking and stuff was, very much my thought of like, how, like, yes, she opens the door well, but what does that mean to be good at opening a door? Right. And I was like, well, because also our apartment, is pretty old, and there's like tons of creeks and old Western towns. You get that vibe of like, this is stuff that was maybe not built super well, was propped up pretty quick in these little tiny towns, and maybe is old and falling apart. And so things creak and whatever. And I was like, it's that kind of thing where it's like the stairs in my parents' house, I know which stairs creak and where. And so if I wanted to go up those stairs perfectly silently, exactly I know what way to go do it. And so it was like, that is a way that you would open a door well.
It was a extremely nice, extremely satisfying, rewarding of a nat 20 on something that could have been very, you know all the things.
Right, like a disappointing nat 20.
Yeah. So I particularly like that. I made a note of it when it happened. I was like, oh, that was very fun. I will steal that.
I'm glad.
That's another tip of this show. If you ever see anyone do anything good, just steal it for your own game. That's what you should do.
What's the saying? Good writers borrow, great writers steal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
Goes for DMs as well.
Goes for DMs too.
Midnight Muscadines is a cozy, dark tabletop role-playing game where light and shadow intertwine in a fractured world. Players take on the roles of marmoteers, brave adventurers who journey into the untamed wildernite to collect the elusive midnight muscadines, craft magical jams, and protect the fragile light of Nim. Through collaborative storytelling and resourceful gameplay, players weave tales of courage, community, and the pursuit of balance. Will you preserve the light, uncover the truths hidden in the shadows, or reshape the balance of the world forever? Midnight Muscadines is perfect for fans of Studio Ghibli and Sea of Stars who seek to capture the magic of exploration and the heartfelt adventure in a world where small heroes make a big impact. Play Midnight Muscadines as a traditional GM'd game, GMless, or even solo. Midnight Muscadines is crowdfunding now on BackerKit. Join the campaign at pandeongames.com/muscadines.
I'm Quinns of tabletop role-playing game review show Quinn's Quest, and this is Play to Find Out. Play to Find Out is an actual play podcast that brings notorious old games from the 80s and 90s back to the table. Each season of Play to Find Out, I'm joined by Emily Johnson and Rob Morgan.
Good? Nervous?
Yeah.
You both looked at each other really concerned, like you think what's about to happen is going to be unpleasant. And frankly, I think that's rude.
And together, we explore the TTRPGs of ages gone by. Our goal, to separate the TTRPGs that deserve to be remembered from those that maybe don't. I don't know, Emily. It was the 80s.
Also,
a lot of people were on cocaine. We blow the dust from decrepit systems to learn how they work. Your 100 on the encounter table bursts out. Right, you've encountered a bug. Get ready. Don't laugh.
There's one get ready for a fog.
Don't laugh. Encounter their unique quirks.
I do finger guns to cover up how I wince.
A weird thing happens as you do finger guns.
Oh no.
And I'm hoping that the Quinn's Quest community will join us in exploring these games too. If you this up, cannot describe to you how much your adventure ends here.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because the best way to learn is to play to find out. Play to Find Out is available now on the Quinn's Quest Patreon, but the first episode of each series streams for free on the Quinn's Quest YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Anyway, you failed the Earth-Tech roll, and you made jokes while I was doing my exposition, so you don't get to hear any more.
Oh, no. Come on.
I was shook as...
So we've talked about some highlights. Let's talk about areas of improvement. And I know we've kind of touched back and forth. We've talked about areas where you thought you've improved, areas that I kind of wanted to highlight. Between the first time we talked and now, what is an area you think that you still need to improve on or that you are actively looking to improve upon?
Honestly, it's a lot of the same stuff from before. It's just the kind of thing of now that I have a bit more experience in it, I feel more confident in my ability to do better and also feel like I have a better grasp on exactly how to do it. So for example, with the battle stuff, I feel like I did a better job of making it a more interesting setting. The people they were fighting, it was a little bit closer to an even match. I had taken a lot more time to look at. It was a giant poisonous snake, 3 cultists, a cult fanatic, and then the harpy matriarch. And I took a lot more time in reading through and used the Monsters Know What They're Doing, the website.
Yes, the Monster Network, very good blog, and also a couple of series of books by the same author.
It was, and it was super helpful in planning of being like we had talked about, optimizing these guys of what would they do, and feeling more confident in knowing what moves made sense for them so that I didn't feel like I was scrambling or panicking. Because it is the kind of thing of when you have one player when you're a PC, there's a lot going on your character sheet, but you only have one character. You need to keep track of all the different moves or whatever. When you're the DM, you have 6 or, however many guys. And so while I still feel like, and we had talked about this with the Harpy Matriarch, I fell a little short of doing her best job. And with the Cult Fanatic as well, I think I fell a little bit short just because they were the more complex of the characters. I felt so much more confident going in, where I forgot to practice with my players. So Saris was first in the initiative and immediately was like, do I get sneak attack? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't look into that. I completely forget how it is that a person has the sneak attack condition, and immediately was just like, Brian, does Sarah's sneak attack? Because I was like, crap, I don't know how my players are supposed to function, and so cannot answer questions for them. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, if you were not here as a resource, yeah, I could be like, you know what? I don't know, and look it up. And you as a DM have done that before. So yeah, it's another thing where battles, there's just a lot of information to keep track of and be on top of. And I, again, feel like my villains I felt a lot better about them. They still were not, I optimized, and I was not, I feel like a well-versed enough resource to my players. But again, those are things that I feel like you learn as you go. And as I said, I easily could have taken the reins and been like, you know what, let me double check and refresh my own memory about what sneak attack is instead of jumping to you. But because you're here and you're so nice and so pretty, I was like, Brian, why don't you jump in?
So first off, just for anyone who's curious, sneak attack is a rogue ability. You get it whenever you either have advantage on a roll or you have a ally within 5 feet of the creature you're attacking. So it's essentially just a condition you get under those two circumstances. There are other circumstances you can get depending on your subclass, but generally that's what it is. And it allows you additional 1 to 10 D6, I think, at level 20. So a lot of what you're describing is just familiarity with rules and especially with shorthand of things. So like to know exactly what sneak attack means, to know what charmed means, to know what the poison condition is. And a lot of that is just through repetition. A good resource is just the player's handbook. Mm-hmm. You flip through the first couple chapters of that, you're going to see a lot of this is laid out very well and very simply, which is luckily a very good resource to use.
The other area that, again, I feel like was a little bit of a repeat was I, at the end of the battle, was like, oh my God, like they're not just going to drive off into the sunset. I've told them the train isn't coming. Like I was like, you have to do something now. You have to have an end scene. And also it was dawning on me as the battle was wrapping up where I was like, there's like, people have heard this. People are going to come. They still have the treasure. Are they going to get arrested? Are they going to have to now fight Marsden? How are they going to escape this? Am I going to make them all just run for it? Like, wow, what am I going to do? And it felt similar to when Chevelle wanted to try to decouple the cars. And I panicked and was like, everything I have planned is on the other side of those cars. Where I once again was like, man, I have to think about what's happening here. And I felt again like I was one step ahead, but it was a thing that I felt better about. And also feel like if I wasn't trying to just wrap it up,
right,
that I would have felt a little more okay being like, okay, you test this out, see what they say, go here, do this. And this was an instance where it was like I was doing that, but I was also trying to get us to a point. And so it was, again, I think both the battle and feeling like I don't know where you guys are going or what you're doing, that it's the kind of thing where it's really just going to take practice. Like the more I do it, the more comfortable I will feel doing it.
Endings are hard, full stop. And you were definitely trying to wrap up the session. So I think it is extremely different from the decoupling thing, where the decoupling thing, I think you were like infringing on agency a little bit, mostly because everything you'd planned was on the other side of the car, which is a totally fair reason to not allow that, especially as a first time DM. In this case, I don't think that it's necessarily comparable in the way that you're worried about.
It was internally, solely for me.
Sure,
they were both instances in which I felt like I am unprepared. I do not know if you guys do, like if you uncouple these train cars or if you do X at the end of this battle, I have no idea what I'm going to make everybody else do in reaction to that. And there's something a little bit scary about having that be fully open and wanting to make sure that I have the right response, or a response that like is going to get us somewhere that makes sense or is good to go to, or, you know, whatever it is. And so it was a moment where I kind of felt like I was like, I don't know, we're going to see where this goes.
Right.
Which there's a little bit of a scary aspect too, that I feel like it was a little easier this time. So as I said, I think just the more I practice it, the less terrifying. And it also was the end where I was like, I could also just be like, and yeah, that was it. Good session, guys. And like, it would be disappointing to wrap it up that way. But I was like, I have an out. Whereas at other points where I had this feeling, I was like, you do not have an out. You just have to keep playing.
I think it's a time where you can kind of throw it to your players a bit, where we all know the lay of the land. We know what the score is. We've killed Jolene. We have one person left. There is a big party going on nearby. They've probably heard us. We've got this treasure that belongs to Marsden Greed. There's a sheriff in town. You could then ask, like, so you've just killed them. You got to get out of town. What do you guys do? And kind of let us narrate how we finish off the adventure a little bit.
That's why I wanted to put in your hands what you guys wanted to do with that last Broline, as we called them, where I was like, part of me was like, it'd be so hilarious if they tried to recruit him into their gang and you guys became like a gang of 5 instead of 4. Or I liked what you guys did too, where you just immediately were like, you wanted to give yourselves clout, where you're like, we killed her, and also here's another one of her guys who we also have for you. Give us like more clout and money and rewards and like all this stuff. It was a thing when you kept saying that you guys were the deplorable 4, but there were only 2 of you visible. I was like,
1, 2, 3, 4, deplorable 4.
I was like, you do have a third man who's like, you've got your arm around him. And I told you the sheriff like recognized the patch, but wasn't putting 2 and 2 together. So like you could have said he was like one of your friends or whatever. But that's what I mean is like I handed some aspects of it to you guys because I wanted to see what, because if you guys were like, pew, pew, let's shoot him up and run, we would have had to make an ending work with that. But I kind of wanted to see where you guys went.
That's also a thing could have kind of like, in keeping with the Western tradition of like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, we're surrounded on all sides by a posse of lawmen, where we're going to go out shooting, freeze frame as we run out in front of the, Mexican army.
Mm-hmm.
So there are fun kind of endings you could do with that, should you so want, or just leave it as a cliffhanger, like next time on the Deplorable 4 type
right,
thing.
Yeah.
The Deplorable 4 will ride again. I think we were talking about this, and there was a thing I forgot to talk about that I think was very fun and is also embarrassing for me for reasons I'll explain in a moment.
So
which
curious.
You already know. When Saris discovered the sword, she was trying to essentially like attune to it. You made her make Arcana checks with slowly, like the more she tried it, the easier it got. When she was finally able to attune to it, an inscription appeared on the hilt.
Yeah.
That was the command phrase to activate the flame tongue dagger.
Yeah.
And in this Western one shot with the great Jolene of Dolly Parton as the villain, the etching came up MI space MAYN. And I looked around the table on our Zoom and I had not gotten it. Everyone was like, sounding it out in their head, like my. And then someone at some point says, my man. And I'm like, oh, is that the joke? My man? Because all I was saying,
Saris was like, and she said it perfectly with like this twang where it was the way you go to pronounce it of like my man, or you put some kind of twist on it just because of the way that I chose to spell it, and it was perfection. And I want to say it was she got it and Schvel got it.
She also said, and it did not click for me, that she's going to try to take it. And of course, if you know the song Jolene, I'm begging, darling, please don't take my man. And it took until after the session.
It was like an hour later when we were talking about it.
When we were like, I was confessing to Abby that I didn't get the joke. And then she was like, oh, it's so funny because she's trying to take my man. And then it was only after that point that I actually got the joke. Like, not only I had multiple stops where I didn't understand this joke. And it was truly the fault of the audience. Sometimes the audience is in the wrong. And this is very much one of those times. But I do think having this kind of like goofy, punny, jokey reveal in a one shot, especially around, when you decided to have Jolene be the villain of this Western, is very fun. And it's one of those moments where players get to have this like fun aha laugh
like
moment.
Meta thing going on.
It's the thing you get to do as a DM that's like, hey, here's my Easter egg. here's my like written joke. Cause everything else you're going to do is going to be on the fly. But having these like small little Easter egg moments are very fun if your audience is smart enough to understand them, which I was not.
Well, it was so funny because as soon as I decided that Jolene was the villain and that you guys were like basically on a treasure hunt, and I knew that I wanted to have there be within the treasure we had talked about this at length. I don't know how I latched onto these ideas. I can't quite remember, but I knew within the treasure I wanted there to be a weapon, and I wanted it to be something that required attunement because I wanted it to be, I think there is something very fun to like, you have to roll to see if you can use the cool new toy.
Right.
And
because normally an attuned weapon or an attuned item you need to like sit with it for a short rest to be able to attune to it and use it.
So I wanted this to be something where it's like, you don't quite know how to use it on your first try, so you may not actually be able to do it. And once I figured out that I wanted it to be, the actual magical item is Flame Tongue, is like the name within 5e. But I wanted to like give it a fun name. And I was like, well, it has to be my man. Jolene, don't take my man. And also in keeping with like D&D stuff of like how fantasy and sci-fi spellings make no sense whatsoever, I was like, I think it'll be doubly fun if instead of handing you guys the joke,
you make us work for
I make you work for it a little bit in sounding out. Kevin did this in our home game of his character and a bunch of characters that were related to his backstory. If you see their names just written, you're like, okay. And then when you say them out loud, you're like, oh my God, it's a pun.
Yeah, he had
satisfying.
So his name was, I hope Kevin doesn't mind me saying this, but his name was Bat Benatar, a play on Pat Benatar. And one of his, like the guy who trained him as a monk was named Honnold Reagan.
But also, if you look at the spelling of any of these things,
insane. And
it is not an obvious, like Reagan is not spelled how you think it's spelled. And you have to say it out loud and try to pronounce it in order to get the joke, which I love.
What killed me about it is he got me. Like I didn't say it out. This is a little like just tip for any DMs out there. Anytime you make an NPC name, say it out loud, because every now and then you realize some of this crazy fantasy spelling has made you say something you might not have wanted to say. But I said Honnold Reagan out loud, and then it like clicked for me the second I said it. Everyone around the table kind of groaned and or laughed, and then he played me. He played me.
It was great.
Congratulations, so I played myself. But then not only that, the second person he had in his backstory was named. It was spelled J''MI space. Last name is like KARTIR or something. And I even was like, you know what? I'm not going to get fooled by it. I won't get fooled again. The Who told me.
I won't get fooled
and
again.
I said it out loud like 3 or 4 times. I was like, how could this possibly be anything? It can't be Jamie Cartier, Jamie. No, that's definitely not a thing. And then we got to the scene where Jamie Carter was revealed, and I said it, and I stood up. I want to say I like stood up or yelled. I was like, God damn it. And what was even funny is I remember listening or saying that aloud to myself. I was like, what are some other presidents he could have gotten me with? Ronald Reagan. Okay, what about Bill Clinton? What about Jimmy Carter? Could this be Jimmy Carter? No, it's not Jimmy Carter. Next. And God damn it, it was. So sometimes your players get the best of you, and that's okay.
It's fun. It's fun. But that was, I feel like it was a thing. I always knew I really wanted to do this, and I'm really glad that I went back and forth between being like, should I just have it say MYMAN? And then was like, I trust you guys. Because that was one of the things as well within planning the puzzle, where I was like, I'm nervous in the same way that you have no idea where your players are going to go and what they're going to do. I wasn't sure what was going to end up being something that you guys got or didn't get. Mm. And so with the sword, it's a joke. And so if I have to explain it to you, really the only consequence is like, I feel silly having crafted a bad joke, and maybe you guys feel silly for not having gotten it.
I certainly feel silly for not having gotten this joke.
And so went back and forth, and with the puzzle, it was a similar feeling of like, I want to make sure you guys can solve this, but I don't want to make it so you get it immediately. And you guys did get it immediately, but you you had fun with it.
We did.
Yeah, which made me feel a lot better. And I also think that you guys had a good time in figuring out. And I did throw a little not a loophole. I threw a little extra detail in there to make it a little harder. I was terrified that I was screwing you guys over, and it made no difference whatsoever. So
yeah. Since you're touching on the puzzle, let's talk about the puzzle a little bit. I know you got this one from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything.
Yeah.
I think
it was the skeleton key chest, I think is like the name of the puzzle.
So in the
there.
back of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which is a D&D source book, there's a whole section on puzzles, and you had chosen one of the easy ones, kind of at my recommendation of generally with puzzles, pick something a little easier than you think, let your players figure it out quicker and have fun with it, rather than choosing something that is overly complicated, or because sometimes puzzles that end up in D&D books kind of require weird leaps of logic. Like I know there's one in Tomb of Annihilation where there's a statue of like a guy carrying a crocodile. So the only way to cross the room is to like have someone get on your shoulders. So
okay.
And I remember doing that and like just in my head thinking, what are the mechanics that activate this trap? Like what camera system is looking at people crossing?
And you're not on his shoulders.
And analyzing and seeing,
arrows
there's
rain
two
down
people.
on you.
Exactly.
How does it judge that it's two people stacked on top of each other in a trench coat?
Exactly. So talk to me about, so you didn't actually design this puzzle, but you did add a little spin to it and you executed it. Talk to me about what you thought went right and what you thought went wrong with the puzzle.
So with the puzzle, it was a similar concern to the battle of wanting to make sure that it was balanced. And it was very interesting to me in that, like, you had given the advice of battles, make it a little harder than you think it's going, than you need it to be. You can, as you said, like always have a guy run away or, you can figure it out on the fly, but make it a little harder than you think. Puzzles, you gave me the opposite tip, which was to give them something a little easier than you think they can handle, because yes, it's true. You never know. Sometimes people get really caught up in a bunch of things. And especially in this instance, since we were playing over Zoom, there was no visual aspect that I could hand you. Mm-hmm. Some of the puzzles in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything had a like printout that you could scan or like hand out to people that I'm sure I could have, you can send a document around and Zoom and everything. But like I was like, this is too complicated. I'm not going to do it. So I wanted to pick something that I felt like you guys could solve without, getting sort of lost in your own head. But it just, again, was a kind of thing of like, until you run it or you see what happens, I was really nervous that it was going to be too easy and you guys would figure it out immediately. And then it wouldn't be fun for you. And then I was also nervous because I planned to, I don't know why I chose this. So the actual puzzle itself is there are keys that have different numbers of teeth. There are 4 locks. And each of the locks has a picture above it of an animal. And the solution is that the number of teeth is a reference to the number of letters in the name of the animal. I added in that they each had a different color ribbon.
As a red herring.
And up until the moment I described everything to you guys, was still on the fence about whether or not I was going to have those colors. And I had gone back and forth between choosing colors that deliberately had 3, 4, 5, and 6 letters, or deliberately choosing colors, which is the route I went, that did not fit the number of teeth on the keys as well. And was terrified that like somehow I was absolutely going to screw you guys over, because the bit of it as well was if you stuck the wrong key in the wrong lock, whatever animal picture was above the keyhole, you roll a D4 and that number of that creature pops out of like thin air. And you now basically have to battle 4 giant bats as you are simultaneously trying to solve this puzzle. So it just like makes it increasingly harder.
So I'm not a big fan of puzzles like this I like puzzles in general as like a person. The problem that I find with them in D&D, when they get more complicated, I think this was a good level of like simplicity. And could you have gone a little bit harder? Yes. But I think staying on the easier end is more fun because you can still have aspects of role play. It doesn't break immersion. When you get into more complicated puzzles that you need to like sit down and write out, all of a sudden you're not talking. It becomes more and more difficult to keep talking in character And it's more becomes me, Brian, trying to solve a puzzle rather than me, Doc, trying to figure out this puzzle.
Well, it was a very interesting experience for me at having picked this puzzle, being unsure. At least 3 of the 4 of you figured it out immediately and knew exactly like which key went which place. And yeah, the colors of the ribbons threw you off a little bit, or there was some discussion about like what order you had to stick them into the chest. And I could have made it so you had to put them like in increasing, ascending or descending order. I did. That wasn't part of it from the book. And so I didn't do it. But that I was a little disappointed that you guys got it immediately. However, you guys had a lot of fun then playing the solution as your characters. Like Chevelle was so funny in talking through how the number of teeth on each key related to the like look of the animal. And then Gord being like, I've seen 5 snakes in my life, so 5 is probably snakes. And it's like, yeah, the person who made this definitely knew personally who you were and how many snakes you'd seen. And so it gave everybody an opportunity to do that. And I feel like the more I think about it, the more I think that that was the fun bit. It's like, yes, it was very fun getting this puzzle, thinking about it, coming up with the solution, which you guys also weren't 100% sure was correct, although you were pretty sure it was correct. But then the fun, an additional fun bit was being able to be in character solving it.
With any encounter, whether it be combat, whether it be puzzle, whether it be social, the goal of the game is always to be able to reaffirm character and character choices. And when you're in a social encounter, it's pretty easy. Like you interact with a person, you are constantly thinking about your character and acting as your character. In combat, it can be, a little hit and miss. You can, yes, be acting as your character, but sometimes it becomes that battle game. It becomes that, war game where you're trying to optimize your things and you're not necessarily thinking of character. I think when you're looking at puzzles, make sure you're crafting something that still allows the characters that is still able to like affirm who they are.
Right. It is also the kind of thing of like, for instance, having that rope with the knot, which is just something I added to the puzzle for fun, specifically relating to us. If somehow it had been the case that Gord was the only person attempting to figure out this puzzle, I wouldn't have given him that knot because it had already been established that Gord has no clue what to do with this thing.
Right.
And Kevin would have been frustrated being like, I know what to do with this, but Gord doesn't. And it is disappointing to be like, well, so like, I guess I'll come up with a way for Gord to figure it out then. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm starting to see the benefit. I'm starting to see the like, because as I said, I was slightly disappointed that it was so easy for you guys, but I think there was a lot more benefit in doing something that turned out to be a little bit too easy, but that you guys could play with versus doing something that was a challenging puzzle.
It's more interesting as a player to be able to figure out a puzzle or a situation as a player and then role play it as a character of either being able to figure it out or not figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
It is less satisfying to be me, Brian, being presented with a puzzle that I can't solve but my character being smarter than me and having him like roll to solve it. I would always rather play down than have to have my character do something that I'm not necessarily capable of.
Yeah, no. And
maybe that's just me. That might not be for everybody, but I would rather have a solution and be able to play with the fact that I know what the solution is and I could lead my character down any number of paths like what Chevelle did to find the correct solution.
Right. Like he presented the correct solution, but in a way that made no sense whatsoever. Like it was illogical, but correct. But that was so much fun. It is also a thing where I will say with puzzles, because I enjoy doing them and would love to kind of maybe play with this a little bit more of testing it out. But in reading through, like I was just scanning through them in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. A lot of them were similar to, it's like the guy holding a crocodile statue. And so it just didn't seem like a satisfying puzzle. And I feel like if you are the kind of person who's good at like crafting a puzzle, that might be a more fun way to go, or to do like a classic riddle with a twist or something, because too many of them, I was like, as a DM, this wouldn't even be satisfying to present to you guys. There were a lot of great ones in there, especially ones that were harder, but there were some where I was like, this doesn't even feel like fun to present to you, let alone for you guys. It's even if it's easy to figure out, it would be unsatisfying to figure out.
I always think the better puzzle is the puzzle of a social encounter of, we need to talk to this guy, but there are these people in our way. How do we play this person off this person to get to this person?
Yeah, I do think that is a fun
which
way to
is
twist,
not
puzzles.
like the classic D&D puzzle, but it allows more play than a box or like a Rubik's Cube does.
Yeah. I'm going to keep trying puzzling, but it is an interesting
It's a tough challenge.
Complexity.
It's one that I've never found satisfying, and so I've mostly avoided.
It was also a thing, and we talked about this. I can't remember if it was before, or I think we definitely talked about it afterwards, where it was Jolene was coming underground in hot pursuit of you guys, and you were presented with this puzzle. I was never going to make Jolene pop up in the middle of your puzzle solving. I was always, that's why I was like, she seems to have hit some kind of roadblock. You don't know how long it's really going to take her to clear this or what's happening there, but she's on her way. Because I was like, the fun of figuring this puzzle out is like, maybe you guys think there's like a time constraint, but like, I want you to actually be able to do it. And so I was never going to like ruin that whole thing by having her pop out.
I kind of like having people pop out at inopportune times. Like having her, all of a sudden we hear her footsteps down when we're like deciding whether or not we should put the keys in. So it's kind of like, hey, it's now or never type thing.
But in that particular instance, it is, you guys have quote unquote solved it, or you think you have. And then it's just a matter of like, which is why like when after you guys had opened it and I was like, you either have to pick up this heavy chest and carry the whole thing, where it's also kind of like an obvious, like you are carrying the loot in the treasure chest in which it was stored, or do you want to take a minute to sort it into like, you know, empty satchels and carry it?
What are you going to do with this loot?
What are you going to do with it? And then I was like, now I put the pressure on of like the clock's ticking, because now it's more fun of you guys making that split-second decision. But if you're still sitting there like, I don't know how to solve this puzzle, and now you've had my bad guy pop up, and now it just is a thing that personally, I feel like it would frustrate me more than be like, this is crazy, like, but in a fun way. And so I was like, I'm never going to do that to you guys.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Now that we've kind of talked about the adventure, I want to move on to a new segment that I'm doing for this show. I'm calling it two options. You could choose. It's either the shit you didn't get to say, or it's left on the dungeon floor.
Oh, left on the dungeon floor, of course.
Then let's go with left on the dungeon floor. What is something that you had planned?
Oh my God, so much.
Either like written down or something that you didn't get to do, whether for better or for worse, that we didn't take that path, we didn't get to see. What was the number one thing that you planned that we didn't get to see?
Oh man, there was a bunch of stuff I had planned towards the beginning, and it's in my notes that have been posted to the website. Mm-hmm. I had put in Tallulah Lilyhammer as a NPC who, before you guys even got on the train, she was going to be basically like your groupie, the only groupie of the Deplorable Four.
That's fun.
And she was going to like run in and basically she was crafted as a way to introduce Gord's knot and pants situation, because as your groupie, she was going to have made you guys flashy new outfits. Like okay. And also the plan for the outfits was that they were going to be very much like ABBA, but like ABBA meets Western, of like
ABBA with fringe. ABBA with more fringe.
Like glam, like Lady Gaga cowboy, her Joanne era. And so I had a whole plan. And basically the point of it was that she would have specifically made these very cool pants for Gord. And he would have been like devastated that he can't, or she would have made him a jumpsuit, something where it was like as a way to introduce the fact that he cannot take his pants off. Right. So I made her, and I just didn't think she was, well, it had already taken a really long time for us in the saloon, which is when I was going to introduce her. And I didn't think that she necessarily was, like, I thought you guys had passed the point where she would have been a She just would have been a distraction and like a delay from, at this point, you guys were like, we are going to the train. We know what our goal is. And then to have her pop up and like you have this, 20-minute interaction with her, it just kind of would have been like I can see how you guys would have easily brushed her off and left. And I was like, we'll get to Gord's pants another way.
Right.
So I had her. She was going to be like a groupie for you guys, and to also play up a little bit of your like reputation.
Oh, it's a bummer that got left on the dungeon floor, because I think Doc would have had a lot of fun at that.
I mean, who knows? She could come back in a later session. On the train, I had Samuel was the conductor. Mm-hmm. Had a whole personality, situation, information you could have gotten from him, things he would have challenged you in or let you do or whatever, but he immediately got thrown out the window, literally thrown out the window of the train. So then Samuel became Cece's manservant. Cece also changed as a character on the fly. When I started using her voice, I was like, because she was originally going to be like an older woman who was kind of bored with being, super wealthy. And that's why she was like on this train and observing people of lower classes, of like trying to find some way to like make her life more exciting. And then once I started talking, I was like, oh no, Cece's a young woman. Now I'm going to have to do different things for her. And it was very fun and it like came naturally. So it was fine. But yeah, so Cece changed. I would love to have there's a ton of stuff I would have loved to play in more and do more with. Oh, Dolly and Reba, also the prostitutes from the saloon at the beginning. Mm-hmm. You guys didn't interact with them enough for me to like really flesh them out. But then like when you guys got to Sneak Scorch, I would have loved to have like spent 3 days there of you guys gathering info, making more friends, making more enemies, right, going to the party, doing more stuff. And I didn't do it partly because we were trying to plan this as a one shot. And then also in the first session, it was like, we were hoping it would be a one shot and we were already so far past the amount of time that I think any of us thought we would be playing. And I was like, you just got to keep the ball rolling, girl. But
good stuff to keep in mind if you want to do a longer campaign.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest thing was a bunch of NPCs who I either just entirely didn't use or completely pivoted who they were. Bernice was always Bernice.
Bernice was and always will be Bernice. Great. The last thing I want to talk about is we did this for episode 3 and I want to do it again for episode 5. Do you have any new piece of advice you would give a first-time DM after having now run 2 sessions?
I think a piece of advice, this is a little bit of a roundabout piece of advice, but a thing that I think I did more of and differently in this session was what we had talked about of talk to your players and see what they want. Mm-hmm. It doesn't just refer to preparation and the in-between session stuff. In this session, I multiple times, to be fair, did not actively ask people what they wanted, but could tell there were things. So for instance, when Saris was rolling Arcana checks to be able to use the sword, her first one missed, but I explained to her the mechanic and it was like, okay, cool. So I will get to do this. The second one, technically I had a different DC in my head, but because I hadn't said it out loud and it was a 15, which I was like, she wants to play with the toy and I also want her to. And so I was like, don't be a stickler. Let her do it. Do it. And so I feel like it is, again, a thing of like, pay attention to and tune into what your players want, not just referring to like, we want a Western where we are a gang that beats up a bad guy. It's like, look at them of rewarding those moments of like, you want to go explore that door in the, like Kevin going over to the Gord going over to the drunk guy in the saloon. It's like, do something fun with it. Don't just say no.
Right. This game is a dance. I mean, when people express interest in something, when they start to have their attention focused to something, that's where the attention of the game shifts. You've got to be able to respond to that.
Yeah. So I guess the advice is kind of a flexibility is like your greatest asset.
Yeah. Follow your players.
Yeah. Being able to say, you know what? I had a whole thing planned with the conductor and you literally threw him out the window and we're just going to make do with it. And it is what it is. As well as saying, you know, I had a whole plan for this puzzle and you guys clearly don't want to do the puzzle. So I will come up with another way for you guys to get this information or do this thing. I think being flexible with your preparations is just infinitely important.
Hell yeah.
One other piece of advice that I feel like I'd give people, and not to get like too much, but this isn't just D&D, is it is a real benefit when you can say, I don't know. So like if you're DMing and someone says, do I have sneak attack? And you don't have Brian sitting next to you, I don't know, Google it and like look it up, and like you and your players can learn it together. And that just because you are supposed to be the like quote leader of this game, that like there is a huge relief and benefit in admitting that you don't know and that you guys have to look it up together, or you need to, as a group, come up with like a homebrew solution, and you guys will all have fun figuring that stuff out.
Yeah, the best answer for anytime you say, I don't know, it should probably always follow with, but I can find out.
Right. It's like, yeah, I don't know. Let's go look it up in the book or whatever. Yeah.
Let's figure it out. Abby, thank you so much for joining us on this series. Did you have some fun?
I did. And also just want to again say thank you so much to Naka, Kevin, and Lauren for playing with me and having fun with me and letting me throw Dolly Parton themed puns at them and live out my sort of dream of DMing. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much to Abby and to our players, Naka, Kevin, and Lauren. That is all for part 5 of this 3-part series. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned a little something. Keep your eyes on this feed. We're going to try to do this series again. It was a lot of fun, and we've gotten a lot of good response from it, so we're really excited to give it another try with another first-time DM, maybe try to tackle some other problems that first-time DMs face. And until then, just remember, if you're having fun, you're doing it right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.
Hey everybody, this is Abby. If you enjoyed this episode of My First Dungeon, you might want to check out some of our other shows in the Fractured Realms. For instance, our D&D actual play anthology show, the 20-Sided Podcast. This season is called Prisoners of the Static, and I play Natasha Bolshakot, captain of the Gilded Ghost. Interested? Check out the trailer and tune in every Monday for brand new episodes. Bye-bye!
The Static. A mysterious, mist-covered scar left behind by the Titans. Nothing that has entered that expanse of fog has ever been seen again. Until now, that is. A message in a bottle containing 2 things. The first, a plea for help from the legendary weaponsmith to the gods. The second, a warning. Here, there be monsters. In Season 2 of the 20-Sided Podcast, 3 brand new players will descend into the unknown, shackled by their secrets and fears, and venture past the ominous white expanse to learn, only too late, that they are about to become prisoners of the Static. Be seeing you. If you're hearing this, that means you have listened to every last second of this episode, and that probably makes you a fan of this show. Well, if you're a fan and you like what we're doing and want to help others find it as well, then consider leaving us a 5-star review over on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. Getting more ratings really does help more people find the show, and reading your nice words about the things that we put out into the world makes us feel all warm and good inside, and we want more of those good feels. So head on over to your podcast player of choice and leave us a 5-star review. Thanks.